On the 1st of November, 2003, a 14-year-old girl walked through the streets of Blackpool, England, saying goodbye to her mother on what seemed like an ordinary Saturday evening. She was going to meet friends, just like any other teenager would, but Charlene Downs would never return home. What happened that night would expose a dark underbelly of exploitation in a seaside town, and despite years of investigation, her fate remains one of Britain's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. Charlene Elizabeth Caroline Downs was born on March 25, 1989, in Coventry, in the West Midlands. Her family moved to Blackpool when she was 10 years old in 1999. Blackpool, famous for its tower, its pleasure beach, and its illuminations, was a town that attracted millions of tourists every year. But behind the bright lights and the candy floss, there were darker corners that most visitors never saw. Charlene lived on Buchanan Street with her parents, Karen and Robert, along with her brother and 2 sisters. Her father was a former soldier. She attended St. George's School in Blackpool, but her life had become increasingly chaotic. She'd been expelled from school and had started spending more and more time around the town center, particularly near the Central Promenade, and the area filled with takeaway shops and fast food outlets. The Downs family had been known to Child Protective Services, not just in Blackpool, but previously in Coventry and Walsall as well. What would later emerge during the investigation was deeply troubling. It turned out that at least 16 men with convictions for rape, assault, and violence had either visited or stayed at the Downs family home. These were friends of Charlene's father, Robert. The parents claimed they had no idea about these men's criminal backgrounds. One 40-year-old friend of Robert's later admitted he had paid Charlene to perform a sexual act on him.
How that came about, my husband's a friendly man when he's out. And how it came about, he brought these associates in from the pub, thinking they were just normal friends, or they could stay the night, we can have a drink, that sort of thing. He had no idea, and I had no idea of their background at all. Otherwise, they would have never been in my house. Yeah, we had no idea about that until afterwards, till after Ray Monroe had gone to court. And we found out what terrible things he'd done. All he told us was he'd made a drunken mistake with his girlfriend. Make of that as you will. He didn't tell us anything else, and he was in court on the following Monday, as Charlene disappeared on the Saturday. He was in court on the 3rd. And that was it, really. And when my husband went to court with him, he was horrified, absolutely horrified, to learn that he'd sexually abused children.
Another man in his 60s had been found in bed with Charlene when she was just 12 years old. His trousers were unzipped, his belt unfastened. Even more disturbing, a 34-year-old man had stayed at the Downs home while he was out on bail for sexual offenses. Within the same week that Charlene disappeared, he was jailed for sexually assaulting 3 10-year-old girls. Charlene was one of dozens of vulnerable young girls in Blackpool who had fallen into a pattern of exploitation. According to internal police reports, she was among 60 girls in the town, some as young as 11, who were being groomed by men who worked in fast food outlets. These girls were given cigarettes, food, and small amounts of money in exchange for sexual acts. It was a form of child sexual exploitation that would later become known as localized grooming. On that November evening, in 2003, Charlene's mother Karen was in Church Street handing out flyers for an Indian restaurant where she worked. At around 6:45 in the evening, she saw Charlene and another one of her daughters, Rebecca. The 3 of them talked briefly. Rebecca said she was heading home. Charlene said she was going to meet some female friends. She went to a local telephone box and called them, then waited with her mother until they arrived. Karen watched as the girls walked off together toward the Winter Gardens. That was the last time she would ever see her daughter. Charlene spent a short time with those friends before meeting another friend later that evening around 9:30. Together, they visited the Carousel Bar on the North Pier. There's CCTV footage from 9 o'clock that evening showing a girl believed to be Charlene at the junction of Dixon Road and Talbot Road. She's with an unidentified woman in her 30s with dyed blonde hair wearing a 3/4 length coat. Police have never been able to identify this woman. According to Charlene's friend, they left the Carousel Bar and returned to the town center around 10 o'clock. The friend last saw Charlene at approximately 11 o'clock at night near Talbot Road and Abingdon Street. She was wearing black jeans with a gold eagle design on the front, a black jumper with a white diamond pattern, and black boots. She may also have been wearing a white cardigan or hooded top. After that final sighting, Charlene Downs vanished. Police believe she was murdered within hours of that last sighting. The investigation that followed would become one of the most complex and ultimately controversial in Lancashire Constabulary's history. Police interviewed 3,000 people. They discovered the extent of the exploitation that had been happening in the town center. Girls were swapping sex for food, cigarettes, and what they desperately craved, affection and attention. In March 2006, more than 2 years after Charlene's disappearance, police arrested 2 men on suspicion of her murder. They began forensic searches, including at a takeaway shop called Funny Boys on Dixon Road. The owner was a 29-year-old man from Jordan named Iyad Al-Batiki. His business partner and landlord was Mohammed Raveshi. Both men were charged. Al-Batiki was accused of murdering Charlene. Raveshi was accused of helping to dispose of her body. The case went to trial at Preston Crown Court in May 2007. What emerged during the trial was deeply disturbing. A witness who worked at a different restaurant claimed she had overheard Al-Batiki speaking to her employer. The group had been discussing having sex with girls when Al-Batiki claimed he had previously had sex with Charlene. Then, according to the witness, the group joked that she had gone into the kebabs. The prosecution suggested that Charlene may have had sex with one or both of the men before her death, and that her body had been disposed of in the most horrific way imaginable. Another witness came forward with an even more chilling account. This person claimed that Al-Batiki's brother had confided in them that he knew what had happened to Charlene. According to this witness, the brother said that Charlene had been murdered and chopped up, and that there had been a lot of blood. The witness said they had been threatened not to tell anyone, and were later offered an interest-free £20,000 loan from Raveshi to keep quiet. Despite these threats, the witness went to police in December 2004. The prosecution's case relied heavily on audio recordings from concealed microphones that police had placed in both men's flats and inside Raveshi's car. But these recordings would prove to be the case's undoing. The tapes were described as extremely hard to decipher. It had taken police 2,400 hours over a 2-year period to transcribe the audio. Even more problematic, the prosecution's own sound expert disagreed with the police transcription of the recordings. After hearing all the evidence, the jury deliberated for 49 hours over 11 days. They couldn't reach a verdict. A retrial was scheduled for April 2008. But then serious errors in Lancashire Constabulary's covert surveillance evidence came to light. The problems were so severe that they were reported to the Crown Prosecution Service and the Independent Police Complaints Commission. As a result, the prosecution could offer no case. The men were released. The IPCC launched an 18-month investigation into what had gone wrong. Their final report, published in 2009, identified multiple failures. Police had failed to keep proper records. They had failed to ensure the integrity of their evidence. They had used inexperienced and untrained officers. They had failed to fully transcribe material they had collected. The covert surveillance, in particular, had been handled poorly and unprofessionally. The IPCC recommended that one officer face a disciplinary hearing, another receive a written warning, and 5 officers receive words of advice. Detective Sergeant Jan Besant, who had transcribed the covert surveillance, was found guilty of 2 counts of misconduct by Lancashire Constabulary in 2011. However, in 2012, a police arbitration tribunal overturned that decision. By 2014, Besant's lawyer announced she was suing the police for up to £500,000, claiming that her transcripts had, in fact, been entirely accurate. The collapse of the trial was devastating for the Downs family. In April 2008, the week after the retrial failed, Karen Downs stabbed her husband during an argument. The wounds were minor, and Robert declined to press charges, saying that his wife was maddened with worry and frustration. The family's anguish was compounded by the fact that justice seemed impossible to achieve. The investigation had brought to public attention what journalist Julie Bindel described as endemic child sexual abuse in Blackpool. According to police reports, employees of 11 takeaway shops in the town center had been grooming dozens of white girls aged 13 to 15. A former detective superintendent with Lancashire Constabulary, Mick Gradwell, said that the police inquiry into child grooming in Blackpool, Blackburn, and Burnley had been hampered by political correctness because the girls were white and the perpetrators were non-white. The case attracted attention from far-right groups, including the English Defence League and the British National Party, who organized marches demanding justice for Charlene. The Downs family joined these marches. Karen Downs explained their participation by saying, "No one else has been doing anything to help us." The aftermath of the case continued to generate incidents. In 2009, Charlene's sister Emma was charged with racially aggravated assault against the brother of the man who had been charged with murdering Charlene. She maintained that her assault had never been racially motivated. On the first day of her trial, the prosecution accepted her plea to common assault, a less serious offense. She was sentenced to community service. In 2012, Charlene's younger brother admitted in court to punching the man who had faced the charge of helping to dispose of her body. He was given a fine and a suspended sentence. The Funny Boys takeaway was renamed Mr. Beans. In 2010, it lost its license to serve hot food between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. A police solicitor warned Blackpool Council's licensing panel that young girls were still frequenting the takeaway and that there were concerns about sexual activity occurring. Albataki and Raveshi appealed the decision, claiming they were victims of a smear campaign. Their appeal was rejected. In 2011, Albataki was convicted of assault after headbutting an 18-year-old woman. In November 2014, the BBC's Panorama program aired an episode called The Girl Who Vanished, focusing on Charlene's disappearance. The following month, BBC Crime Watch staged a reconstruction of the last sighting of Charlene. Police offered a £100,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of her killer or killers, or the recovery of her body. On the 1st of August 2017, police arrested a 51-year-old man from Preston who had lived in Blackpool at the time of Charlene's disappearance. He was arrested on suspicion of murdering her, but was released 2 days later. He is no longer under investigation. More than 21 years have passed since Charlene Downs disappeared from the streets of Blackpool. Her body has never been found. No one has ever been convicted of her murder. The £100,000 reward remains on offer. Lancashire Constabulary still believes she was murdered within hours of that last sighting on the 1st of November 2003. Charlene's case exposed a network of exploitation that had been operating in plain sight in a British seaside town. It revealed failures in child protection, failures in policing, and a community that had somehow allowed dozens of vulnerable children to fall through the cracks. For Karen and Robert Downs, and for Charlene's siblings, there has been no closure, no justice, and no answers. Somewhere in Blackpool, someone knows what happened to Charlene Downs that night. Until they come forward, her family continues to wait, and Charlene remains one of Britain's most haunting missing persons cases. That's all for today. Thanks for hanging out. Don't forget to subscribe and be kind to each other.